we are here to talk about something that obviously a lot of people have been thinking about and experiencing, being triggered by, like you name it. And that is all things kind of related to the Epstein files and all of the constant kind of drip of information uh, that we're coming across. Um, and what we are kind of thinking about is how that relates to the work that we do here.
And so we're going to talk a little bit today about how do we see this from a lens of sex addiction?
An addiction perspective, one of the things I think is really important to keep in mind, particularly when we're talking about offending behaviors and, rape, child sex abuse, like all of those types of things, is really to be clear what we're looking at and how we are thinking about it. Because there is actually a clear line, although sometimes it can be blurred, it can be a both and situation. But offending behavior is not necessarily the same as addicted or compulsive behavior. And part of the reason, or part of the way that we kind of think about this and delineate between the two of them is offending behaviors typically are things that victimize people, but are really coming from a place of wanting to exert a sense of power or control. Whereas kind of compulsive behavior is something quite different. It's out of control behavior that otherwise cannot be stopped, but does not necessarily include an offending element to it.
Which I'm really happy that you're bringing up because I think that a lot of people are talking about how did this happen? This is crazy, and I'm focusing a lot on the behaviors versus what got Jeffrey Epstein, to this point. And that's an important question because if we can understand that profile of power and control, understand some of his history, his upbringing, we can understand. And I I pause before saying stop it from ever happening again, but get more educated as a society of how to see the signs of these things before it becomes a national nightmare, an international nightmare.
Yeah. So one of the things I think about is the kinds of profiles or the kind of stories that in the work that I do with clients as it relates to feeling really disempowered or feeling rejected, um, feeling outcast, not feeling loved, not feeling wanted. Any number of those things can really lead to some interesting behaviors that seek to maybe reclaim a sense of control or power in the best ways that people know. And this is one of the things that often happen, particularly when people are young, and they really don't have any other way to express um, what they're experiencing, or maybe not even able to articulate what they're experiencing. And so it comes out through their behavior.
And specifically in this case, in like sexualized behavior, and there, a term we use a lot in our practice is eroticized rage. So maybe if we can't get that out when we're a kid, we can't yell at mom and dad. A way that we can have control over our lives is our sexuality. And so if that is stunted, whether it's because we don't feel attractive enough or we don't feel like we have the means to get that need met as children, sometimes that comes with us into adulthood and it can come out in wildly inappropriate ways, especially if we're not getting the help that we need to really seriously look at where did this develop from.
Mhm. Yeah, it's an interesting kind of fusion of those two experiences where feeling that sense of rage that we don't have any other place for it to go, but then also being sexual gratification also feels really good. So the pairing of those two things can sometimes serve two purposes where we can really kind of vent that rage that we feel, while at the same time experience the kind of visceral, kind of soothing that comes along with sexual gratification. So it creates this really interesting combination of behaviors that can sometimes, take on a bit of a compulsive element. Because if that's the thing that people learn, that they can both experience relief from rage and also experience a physical sense of relief, it can really become a dangerous way that people can express their feelings in a way that really causes a lot of harm.
Right. So then the neural pathway becomes a person getting off doing really dangerous things to other people. And that's the thing in our practice that we're really working on with our clients is how do we understand how the brain got wired that way and how do we rewire it to healthy intimacy and connection, like true connection with another person. For all that that entails, the good, the bad, the ugly sometimes, how can I tolerate that with my partner and rewire that desire for intensity and power and control if that is a flavor profile, um, which we see in some of our clients, not all of our clients, obviously.
Sure. So that's kind of from the perspective of the addiction side, but I'm wondering about any clients that you have or in your experience working with any individuals who've been maybe on the receiving of any kind of offending behaviors in that way, and what some of their experiences are and how you approach it.
Sure. Well, it's complicated. We were in consultation recently and talking about that. It's not the cycle in a relationship like that is not so simple. My spouse or my partner elevates to domestic violence or these type of rageful acts from the get-go. There's a cycle to it. So maybe it starts out with something stressful or frustrating comes up. We don't have the skills to deal with it. We're fighting. We're saying things that we don't mean, and it continues to escalate. So part of my work in working with a partner or somebody inside of a relationship like that is focusing on our lane, validating what's not acceptable, which I want to be really clear. Being hit, being emotionally abused, being financially abused is not the non-acting out person's fault. And what can I do to keep myself safe and keep my lane clean, which is something we like to say a lot, is how do I keep my lane clean? So if I see my partners getting dysregulated by perhaps how I'm phrasing things, how can I work on getting my needs met and stated in a way that keeps my partner in their window of tolerance? And I don't mean that from a codependent way. Rather, we're in a relationship. I care about this other person. It's in everyone's best interest if we can have difficult conversations, which are part of any relationship, from a place of being in our window of tolerance.
Yeah, as you're kind of mentioning that, it seems like it's really difficult for someone to distinguish between whether or not they are doing it as a way to help the other person remain in their window of tolerance as opposed to out of a sense of fear or out of a sense of
Right.
safety and not being on the receiving end of harm. So that sounds like that may be a bit of a tenuous kind of negotiation to really kind of understand what place that's coming from. So, if the goal isn't necessarily only to not be harmed.
Right, of course. And of course, not putting that on the person who is not the perpetrator in that situation, that it's
Right.
not my job to not get hit in the face. And what do I do? What do I do if I find myself in a relationship with somebody who engages in risky behaviors? How can I keep myself safe? And it does involve building one's self-esteem and reevaluating what do I want out of a relationship with someone. And so you look at this case, bringing it back to the Jeffrey Epstein case with this woman that helped him along the way. How did she get into this relationship? And look at the consequences for not taking care of herself and doing her own work and how her behaviors escalated themselves. And she's become an offender herself.
Hmm. So it sounds like it's a really kind of layered situation. And even if that's not the place that we start from a place of offending, that there's usually some origin point if we can identify where that began, and if we can kind of trace back along the way how those escalations kind of led to the place where people eventually end up, and that everybody on the who's observing um, just sees kind of the end product, but not necessarily being privy to the entire path that it took from its origin.
Yeah. And I think like winding down here, like in our practice, we see the betrayed partner, we see the acting out partner. And part of the work is helping both people gain clarity on how did they get to this point right now, and building our job as clinicians is helping our clients build up who do I want to be, and like helping them feel that agency. I can live the life that I want to. I can repair old ways of living that haven't been serving me so well and learn new ways of being with understanding how did I get here. So
Mhm.
you look at a case like this and think, what do we learn as a society? How do we grow and not just let this be fodder on our news feeds?
Mhm. Yeah. And I think it's fundamentally a really big conversation that we're having. And it feels like a really heavy lift to really kind of get people to understand their sense of agency and the power that they have personally, and that it doesn't necessarily have to come at the expense of other people.
100%.